I'm Leslie, 30, female. I live in a small city, in a quiet apartment filled with more books than furniture. For the last 8 years, I've worked for my father's company, Miller's Fine Antiquities, a business he built from the ground up. It was my dream job, allowing me to blend my passion for archaeology with the family legacy. But my dream turned into a nightmare the day my sister, Jessica, was handed the keys to the kingdom and decided I was no longer welcome. This is the story of how she tried to fire me from our own family business, and how her own greed led to her spectacular downfall. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our family business wasn't just a company, it was a living museum. Miller's Fine Antiquities was my father's life's work. He started it with a small loan and a masterful eye for hidden treasures. He dealt in history in stories told through wood, canvas, and stone. Growing up, my sister Jessica and I were his apprentices. We spent our summers dusting ancient furniture and learning the difference between a genuine Roman coin and a clever fake. But while I fell in love with the history, Jessica fell in love with the price tags. I went to university to study archaeology, a path my father wholeheartedly supported. He always said, "You have the gift, Leslie. You don't just see an object, you see its soul." When I graduated, he created a position for me as head of acquisitions. My job was to travel, to dig, to find the forgotten relics of the past and bring them into the light. I wasn't just an employee, I was the heart of the business, the one who found the magic that Jessica, our lead salesperson, would then turn into profit. We were supposed to be a team. Dad's plan was always for us to run the company together when he retired. It was a promise he'd made to us under the dusty chandeliers of the main showroom 100 times. "The two of you," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion, "are the future of Miller's. You are its mind and its heart. Together, you will be unstoppable." Jessica was always the more pragmatic one. She was brilliant with numbers and had a sharp, cutting business sense that could intimidate the most seasoned collectors. She was beautiful, polished, and engaged to Mark, a financial advisor who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. I, on the other hand, was more comfortable in dusty dig sites than in high-stakes auction rooms. I wore practical boots, not designer heels. Despite our differences, I believed in our shared future. I thought our skills complemented each other perfectly. I was the one who found the treasure, and she was the one who made sure it found the right home. The system worked, and the business thrived. When Dad announced his retirement, he called us into his office. It was a room filled with leather-bound books and the faint smell of old paper and wood polish. He looked tired but proud. "It's time," he said, his eyes glistening. "The company is yours now. I'm appointing Jessica as CEO, given her experience in management, and Leslie, you'll continue to lead acquisitions with a permanent seat on the board. You'll make the final call on every piece we bring in." It wasn't exactly the co-leadership we discussed, but it seemed fair. Jessica had the MBA after all. I trusted her. I trusted my father's judgment. I shook her hand, smiling, and promised to help her lead our family's legacy into a new era. I had no idea that her era would begin with my execution. The change was immediate. The day after Dad cleared out his desk, the atmosphere at Miller's shifted. Jessica, who had always been sharp and ambitious, now carried herself with an air of absolute authority. She was no longer my sister. She was the CEO. She started calling mandatory staff meetings at 7 a.m., a full 2 hours before we usually opened. She implemented a new sterile dress code and replaced the warm, classical music that used to drift through the showrooms with generic, soulless corporate pop. Her fiancé, Mark, was suddenly a constant presence. She had created a new position for him, Chief Financial Officer. His first order of business was to trim the fat, as he so delicately put it. He walked around the offices with a clipboard and a condescending smile, scrutinizing every expense, from the high-quality packing materials we used for shipping priceless artifacts to the coffee in the break room. David, our head of operations who had been with Dad since the beginning, was a nervous wreck. "She's questioning everything, Leslie." He whispered to me one morning, "Things your father approved for 20 years, she's calling wasteful." I tried to talk to her. I approached her in her new office, our father's old office, now redecorated in cold shades of gray and chrome. "Jess, what's going on?" I asked. "You're making everyone uneasy." She didn't even look up from her laptop. "It's called modernization, Leslie. Dad ran this place like a passion project. I'm running it like a business. It's a business built on passion." I argued. "That's why our clients trust us. They know we care about the history, not just the profit." She finally met my gaze, and her eyes were cold. "Your passion is an expense. Your last trip cost the company over $50,000, and you came back with a box of broken pottery and a rusty sword." That broken pottery was a rare complete set from the early Ming dynasty, and that rusty sword belonged to a 17th century nobleman. They are worth 10 times the cost of the trip, and you know it. I shot back, my voice rising. "The market is volatile," she said dismissively. "We need guaranteed returns, not gambles. From now on, all acquisitions budgets are frozen. You will focus on selling our current inventory." I was stunned. "Frozen? That's impossible. Our reputation is built on finding new, unique pieces. We'll become stale." "That's my decision," she said, her tone final. "You work for me now, Leslie. You do well to remember that." The final blow came a week later. She called me into her office at the end of the day. Mark was there, standing behind her chair like a silent guard. A sterile, white envelope was sitting on the polished surface of her desk. "Leslie," she began, her voice devoid of any warmth, "Mark and I have been reviewing the company's structure. We've identified several redundancies. In a business that needs to be agile and profit-focused, we can't afford to carry sentimental roles." I knew what was coming, but the audacity of it still felt like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? Your role as head of acquisitions is being dissolved," she stated flatly. "It's no longer financially viable. We're moving to a consignment-only model. It's much cleaner." I stared at her, speechless. "My own sister, you're firing me from our family's company, the company Dad wanted us to run together. I am the CEO," she said, pushing the envelope toward me. "And I'm making an executive decision. Your personal effects will be packed and sent to your apartment. Security will escort you out." I didn't touch the envelope. I looked at her, at the sister I had grown up with, and saw a complete stranger. Then a strange thing happened. A slow, quiet laugh escaped my lips. It started small, a little puff of air, and then it grew. I couldn't stop it. The sheer, unbelievable absurdity of it all was just funny. Jessica frowned. "What's so funny?" I shook my head, still chuckling. I finally managed to say, wiping a tear from my eye. "You really think you can just erase me? You think this is your company to gut and sell for parts?" I stood up, my laughter finally subsiding into a cold calm. "You have no idea what you've just done." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving the severance package untouched on her desk. I didn't need security to show me the door. I knew the way. Being locked out of my life's work was a shock, but the laughter I felt in Jessica's office wasn't madness. It was the spark of an idea. Jessica saw Miller's as a list of assets on a spreadsheet. She didn't know its secrets. I did. I knew every hidden compartment in every antique desk, every artist's signature tucked away in a corner, and every story whispered by the objects we housed, and I knew the most important secret of all. My father was a brilliant man, but he was also a deeply sentimental and cautious one. My first call was to David. He met me at a small coffee shop, looking older and more worried than I'd ever seen him. "She's a tyrant, Leslie," he said, his voice low. "She and that fiancé of hers are liquidating everything they consider low yield. Pieces your father cherished. It's a garage sale. I need your help, David," I said, getting straight to the point. "I need access to the archives, not the official digital ones, the old ones, Dad's private records." David's eyes widened. "Her Royal Highness has that room under lock and key. She said it was obsolete data. But the key, your father gave me a copy years ago for emergencies." He slid a small, ornate brass key across the table. "He said you'd know what it was for if the time ever came." That night, I let myself into the gallery. The silence was eerie. The familiar, comforting scent of old wood and history was still there, but it felt tainted by Jessica's cold ambition. The archive room was in the basement, behind a heavy oak door. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, it was like stepping back in time. Floor to ceiling shelves were filled with my father's meticulous hand-written ledgers dating back 40 years. This was the true soul of the company. Every object he had ever bought or sold had its story recorded in these books, penned in his elegant cursive. Jessica and Mark, with their obsession with digital efficiency, had dismissed this as junk. They had no idea it was the company's real treasure map. I started with the ledgers from the early days. For hours, I sat on the floor, the only light coming from my phone's flashlight, turning page after dusty page. I was looking for a pattern, a name, anything that felt out of place, and then I found it. A series of acquisitions from a single source, a small, obscure estate in rural England. The purchases were listed simply as miscellaneous historical documents, but the prices paid were astronomical. Far too high for what was essentially old paper. My heart started to pound. I referenced the dates with my father's travel logs. He had made several trips to that same region, always alone. He had told us he was visiting old friends. I pulled out the corresponding sales ledgers. The miscellaneous historical documents were never sold. They weren't in the inventory. They had simply vanished, but the money to acquire them had certainly been spent. Millions of dollars over 2 decades, all flowing to a single estate, with no resulting assets on the books. I knew my father wasn't a thief. He loved the company more than anything. This wasn't embezzlement. This was something else. This was a plan. He was moving money, converting it into something that wouldn't show up on a standard balance sheet. Something Jessica and Mark, in their ruthless quest for profit, would never even think to look for. And as I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of 40 years of history, I started to understand. My father had seen this coming. He knew his daughter. He had built a lifeboat. The name of the English estate was Blackwood Manor. A quick search online revealed it was a historic property now owned by a trust. There was very little public information. To understand what my father had been buying, I had to go deeper. I still had my academic credentials and access to university research databases. I started digging, not into the ground, but into digital archives, historical property records, and old legal documents. The pieces started to click into place. Blackwood Manor had belonged to a reclusive historian, a man named Alastair Finch. Finch was an old friend of my father's from his university days. He had passed away years ago, leaving his estate in the hands of a private trust managed by a London law firm. The payments from Millers were not for documents, they were investments. My father had been funneling company profits legally into this trust, but what was the trust for? I found the answer in an obscure academic journal. An article written by Finch 25 years ago detailed his life's work, the authentication and acquisition of the lost library of a 16th century scholar. This wasn't just any library, it was rumored to contain original manuscripts from some of the most famous thinkers of the Renaissance. It was a collection so valuable it was practically mythical. Finch had located it, and my father had helped him acquire it, piece by piece, over decades, using the trust as a legal vehicle to keep it off Miller's official books. This was the company's secret nest egg, its soul. It was an asset so profound that its value couldn't be quantified on a spreadsheet. It was a collection meant to be revealed at the right time, to cement Miller's legacy forever, not as a mere shop, but as a world-class institution. My father had protected it from corporate raiders, from market crashes, and as it turned out, from his own daughter. Now I understood the laughter. Jessica thought she was taking over a company. She had no idea that she had just been handed an empty shell. The real value, the true legacy, was hidden in plain sight, protected by layers of legal trust agreements, and my father's quiet foresight. She hadn't just fired me. She had cut herself off from the family's entire future. My next move had to be precise. I contacted the London law firm managing the trust. Posing as a researcher following up on Alastair Finch's work, I managed to get a junior partner on the phone. I used my knowledge from the ledgers, dropping names and dates with an authority that left no room for doubt. I'm working on a biography of my father, Robert Miller. I explained, and I'm tracing his work with Mr. Finch. I believe my father is the primary beneficiary of the Blackwood Trust. There was a pause on the other end of the line. 1 moment, the lawyer said. After a few minutes of hold music, a more senior voice came on. "Ms. Miller, this is Mr. Abernathy. I was your father's solicitor on this matter. He left very specific instructions. In the event of his retirement or death, discretionary control of the trust's assets was to be passed to you, and only you. He specified it was to be upon your verbal confirmation of a password." He paused. "The password is the heart of the company." My breath caught in my throat. It was what he always called me, the heart of the company. I whispered into the phone, "Very good, Ms. Miller." "Mr. Abernathy said calmly, "Per your father's instructions, you now have full control. The collection is currently in a secure, climate-controlled facility in Geneva. What would you like to do with it?" A plan began to form in my mind, a beautiful, perfect, and devastating plan. "I'd like to put it up for auction," I said. "A private invitation, only auction, and I know just the house to handle it." Jessica was ecstatic. In her quest to liquidate Miller's assets, she decided to host a massive legacy auction. She marketed it as a a lifetime opportunity for collectors to acquire pieces from the venerable Miller collection. She and Mark had spent weeks clearing out the warehouse, cataloging everything they deemed valuable, and preparing for a huge payday. They saw it as their coronation, a way to publicly stamp their authority on the company and fill its coffers before they likely sold off the brand name itself. Through David, who was now my loyal eyes and ears inside the company, I got a copy of the auction catalog. It was a sad sight. They were selling off pieces with immense historical significance for a fraction of their true worth, blinded by their focus on quick cash. But their greed was about to become my greatest weapon. I used my newfound control of the Blackwood Trust to set up my counter move. I established a new anonymous acquisitions company based offshore. Mr. Abernathy handled all the paperwork. To the world, the Phoenix Collection was a mysterious and incredibly wealthy new player in the antiquities market. In reality, its sole director was me, and its bank account was filled with the millions my father had so wisely hidden away. Then I began to work the phones. I reached out to every major collector, museum curator, and historian I had built relationships with over the years. I told them that a new once-in-a-generation collection was coming to a private auction, and that it would be hosted by a new auction house run by me. I sent them teasers, a glimpse of a manuscript page, a photo of a rare binding. The buzz in the art world was immediate and electric. I scheduled my private auction for the exact same night as Jessica's legacy auction. But that was only part one of the plan. Part two involved Jessica's auction directly. Through the Phoenix Collection, I registered as a bidder, an anonymous, online, silent bidder. My goal wasn't to buy everything, just to cause chaos. The night of the auctions arrived. I sat in a small, temporary office space I had rented, a bank of monitors in front of me. On one screen, I watched the live feed of Jessica's auction. She was on the podium, beaming, looking every bit the powerful CEO. On the other screens, I was logged into the bidding software and on a conference call with my own hand-picked auctioneer. As Jessica's auction began, I started bidding. I would drive the prices up on key items, only to drop out at the last second, forcing the second, highest bidder to pay an inflated price. This created a false sense of excitement and value in the room. Then, on other, less flashy items that I knew were secretly undervalued, I would place a single, powerful bid that no one could match, snapping them up for the Phoenix Collection. I was surgically requiring the best pieces of my father's true inventory, the ones with real historical importance, leaving Jessica with the overpriced, purely decorative items. David sent me frantic text messages from the auction floor. Everyone's going crazy. The prices are insane. Jessica and Mark look like they've won the lottery. I smiled. They had no idea they were being played. While they were celebrating their inflated, temporary profits, my private auction was underway across town. Curators from the world's top museums were engaged in a quiet, ferocious bidding war over the lost Renaissance library. The numbers climbing on my screen were staggering, dwarfing the petty cash Jessica was making. My final move was for the heart. The last lot in Jessica's auction was my father's personal desk, a beautiful 18th century piece he had loved. Jessica saw it as just another piece of furniture. I knew it had a hidden compartment where he kept his first ever sales ledger. It was the symbolic soul of the company. The bidding started. I let it climb, and then, with one final click, I placed a bid so high it silenced the room. The Phoenix Collection now owned the soul of Miller's fine antiquities. And Jessica had sold it to me herself. The next morning, the art world was buzzing. Two stories dominated the news. The first was the surprising success of the Miller's legacy auction, which had brought in record-breaking sales figures. Jessica was quoted in every major trade publication, boasting about her new, aggressive strategy and how she had revitalized the brand. She and Mark were the toast of the town. The second story was a whisper, a rumor of a secret legendary collection that had been sold in a private auction for an astonishing 9-figure sum. The buyer and the auction house were shrouded in mystery, which only fueled the speculation. Jessica, blinded by her success, paid no attention to the rumors. She was too busy planning a press conference to announce her triumphant first quarter as CEO. She invited journalists, collectors, and industry insiders to the main showroom, the same room where my father had made his promise to us. I made sure I was on the guest list. David got me an invitation under a false name. I walked in just as Jessica was stepping up to the podium. She looked radiant in a sharp power suit, with Mark standing proudly by her side. When she saw me standing at the back of the room, her smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered, a smug, dismissive look taking its place. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice ringing with false confidence. "When I took over as CEO of Miller's Fine Antiquities, I promised a new era of profitability and strength. Last night's record-breaking auction is a testament to that vision. We have successfully streamlined our assets and proven that this company has a bright and very lucrative future." As she spoke, I gave a quiet signal to David, who was standing by the main control panel. At the back of the showroom was a large digital display that Jessica had installed to showcase auction items. On my command, the screen flickered to life. It wasn't showing a priceless vase or an antique painting. It was showing a live feed from a secure warehouse. In the center of the feed was the magnificent collection of the Blackwood Trust, the Lost Library, laid out on display. An official appraiser from a world-renowned firm was speaking. His voice, patched through the showroom's sound system, was clear and authoritative. "And so we can confidently appraise the total value of the Alastair Finch collection, also known as the Blackwood Trust, at a conservative estimate of $150 million, he announced. The room fell silent. Everyone turned from a beaming Jessica to the screen. A headline appeared below the video feed. "The Blackwood Trust, secret asset of Miller's Fine Antiquities, sold to the Phoenix Collection. Auction hosted by L. Miller and Associates." Jessica's face went white. She stared at the screen, then at me, her mouth opening and closing silently. Mock looked like he had seen a ghost. I stepped forward, my voice calm but carrying through the stunned silence. "My sister is right," I said, addressing the journalists. "She has been very successful at selling off the assets of Miller's. What she failed to mention is that she sold off the furniture but gave away the house." I walked to the front of the room, standing a few feet from the podium. For decades, our father, Robert Miller, built not just a company, but a legacy, a secret legacy worth more than everything in this building combined, a legacy he entrusted to me. Jessica, in her infinite business wisdom, decided I was a redundancy. She fired me. A murmur went through the crowd, so I decided to start my own firm, and my first act of business was to facilitate the sale of our family's true legacy, the legacy she knew nothing about. I looked directly at her, all the humor gone, replaced by cold, hard finality. "You wanted to run a business. Well, you can't have a business without assets, and as of this morning, the most valuable assets are gone. You're the CEO of an empty shell." I turned to the stunned audience. Miller's Fine Antiquities is a name, but the heart, the soul, and the collection now belong to me. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Jessica. The press conference turned into a public humiliation. Journalists swarmed her, not with questions about her success, but about her incompetence. How could she not know about the company's most valuable asset? Was she really fit to be CEO? The company's stock, which had briefly risen after the auction, plummeted. Their board of directors, which consisted of a few old family friends my father had appointed, called an emergency meeting. Mark, ever the opportunist, saw the writing on the wall. He resigned as CFO that same afternoon, issuing a public statement that he had been misled about the company's true financial state. By the end of the week, their engagement was off. Jessica was left completely alone, in the wreckage of the company she had tried so desperately to control. David told me she was forced to resign as CEO. The board appointed him as interim manager, with the sole task of gracefully dissolving what was left of the company. The name Miller's Fine Antiquities, once a respected hallmark of quality, was now a symbol of corporate greed and failure. Jessica had taken our father's life's work and run it into the ground in less than a month. My father, who had been on a long, planned retirement cruise, returned to the news. He called me, his voice heavy with sadness but also with pride. "I knew you were the one, Leslie," he said. "I knew you had the heart for it. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I built that lifeboat for a reason. I'm just glad the right captain was there to steer it." I never saw Jessica again. I heard she moved away, trying to escape the shadow of her public failure. Our family was broken, but perhaps it had been broken for a long time, and I had just been too naive to see it. With the proceeds from the sale of the Blackwood collection, I established a new foundation dedicated to the preservation of historical artifacts and funding archaeological expeditions. I named it the Miller Foundation, honoring the spirit of what my father had truly loved. My new firm, L. Miller and Associates, became one of the most respected names in the world of antiquities, known not for aggressive sales, but for integrity, passion, and an unparalleled expertise in discovering the hidden treasures of the world. I reacquired my father's desk from my own shell company. It now sits in my office, a constant reminder of where I came from. Sometimes I open the hidden drawer and look at that first handwritten ledger. It's a reminder that a true legacy isn't about profit margins or corporate titles. It's about passion, knowledge, and trust. Jessica tried to take my job and my birthright, but all she did was reveal that she never understood what they were worth in the first place. She got the company, but I got the legacy, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.